that Helen Suzman is one of the prestigious women of South Africa. That Helen Suzman, at a time, it was not fashionable to actually stand up and talk and defend human rights for all. Helen Suzman did.
I had a natural thing about bullies. I couldn't stand bullies. And he put his hands through the bars and said, "I'm very glad to meet you." I said to him, "And I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Mandela."
The way she supported us, encouraged not only us in prison, but also freedom fighters.
When I stood up to speak in Parliament, they couldn't say I was talking nonsense, because I could say, "But I have been there, and I saw this for myself."
Côte Saint-Luc's Human Rights Walkway was inaugurated and dedicated to men and women who, by their steadfast commitment to mankind, have held high the torch of human rights and let it light the world. Helen Suzman joins other notable honorees on our walkway, including René Cassin, John Humphrey, a former law school professor of mine, Raoul Wallenberg, Jules Deschênes, Maxwell Cohen, and Mary Tuax Early. One of the reasons I felt so strongly and put forward the name of Helen Suzman was because she was someone that in a normal context many Canadians would not think about. We have no honorees yet from the African continent, yet it is one of the most important parts of the world. She's someone who for her entire life vigorously defended two concepts, human rights and democracy, in a country where for a long period of time they were sorely lacking. And as someone who comes from a minority, whether you speak of the English-speaking minority in Quebec or the Jewish minority within the English-speaking community, I think it's fundamentally important to recognize that speaking up for yourself is fantastic and you need to do that. But when you speak up for others who are being discriminated against, that is fundamentally the most important thing you can do. And whereas Helen Suzman was a woman at a time that women were not held in first-class esteem in society, she was an English-speaking member of a minority in a community that was mostly Afrikaans, and she was a Jewish person in a community that largely wasn't Jewish, and yet she was defending the rights of the black community, the colored community, the Indian community in South Africa that were all treated as second-class or third-class citizens. And for a long period of time, she was the only person in the South African Parliament, when she was the only member for the Progressive Party, that was actually speaking out on those issues. One of my favorite sayings that I have read about Helen Suzman is when she was accused by a minister in the nationalist government of asking questions that embarrassed South Africa. And she replied, "It is not my questions that embarrass South Africa, it is your answers." So today, we are all delighted that South Africa is a proud, equal member of the community of nations, that there's a democratically elected government that is multiracial in the South African Parliament, and it was largely due to efforts by people like Helen Suzman that this took place. In fact, one of the great moments that I recall watching on television was when Nelson Mandela signed the new South African Constitution in 1996. And at that time, Helen Suzman was standing there at his side. For those of you that do not know much about Mrs. Suzman, I wanted to give you a little bit of information that comes from her bio. She was born in 1917, so she's going to be 90 years old next month. So again, from a completely different era. And she grew up as the children of Jewish immigrants that moved to South Africa from Lithuania. Well, I guess I don't have notes on that, but I'll speak off memory. She got married at a very young age, but did finish university, and got involved in politics at the local level in Houghton, which is a suburb of Johannesburg, where she lived together with her husband, who was a physician, and their 2 daughters. What pushed her into politics was largely what pushes most of us into politics, not thinking about it at the time, not thinking about great human rights, grandiose ideas, but was purely local issues that affected her and her family. But as she learned more and more about what was going on in South Africa, she became more and more conscious of things that needed to be fixed. And where again it takes great courage is somebody standing up against the tide, against the overwhelming majority of her fellow citizens, and recognizing something was wrong 20 years before most white South Africans recognized it was wrong. So for Côte Saint-Luc, which is a community that prides itself on respect of human rights, in fact, of most municipalities across Canada, we have taken public resolution stands on human rights issues on a much more frequent basis. And we do that because we're very sensitized to what it means to be a minority. We're very sensitized on the importance of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Quebec Charter of Rights. And we want to vigorously defend those principles, not only for ourselves and for the benefit of our residents, but for the benefit of others, of all colors, all creeds, all races, all religions. And for that reason, Côte Saint-Luc instituted this Human Rights Walkway, and for that reason, it gives me great, great pleasure to welcome Helen Suzman to our distinguished list of honorees. Thank you. And now, in his absence, our federal member of parliament, Irwin Cotler, the former Minister of Justice, has sent us some remarks that I would like to read to you. I am delighted that Helen Suzman, one of the great advocates of human rights in our time, and a leader in the anti-apartheid struggle, now joins the list of distinguished honorees on the City of Côte Saint-Luc's Human Rights Walkway. The city is to be congratulated for this initiative. I first met Helen in 1981 during my first visit to South Africa as part of the anti-apartheid movement. Helen, then a member of the South African Parliament and already a legendary figure in the anti-apartheid struggle, served as my host for the visit with South Africans who were at the forefront of the struggle. I visited with her on subsequent trips to South Africa, where she was eventually instrumental in securing the release of Nelson Mandela, as she was in bringing about the dismantling of apartheid and the emergence of a democratic, pluralistic, egalitarian South Africa. She is a great woman, and this is a wonderful honor for her, as it is for Côte Saint-Luc. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our member of the National Assembly for the riding of Darcy McGee, Mr. Lawrence Bergman.
Consul General, Mayor Housefather, Mayor Steinberg, Mayor Murchie, Mayor Lang, former councillors Goldberg, Benito, and Greenspoon, and councillors and friends Levine, Burku, Brownstein, Goldblum, Kovac, Nashin, and Cohn, and Councillor Alman, dear friends, distinguished guests, and please make greetings today in my capacity as the member of the National Assembly for Darcy McGee. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mayor Housefather and his councillors for this wonderful initiative here in the city of Côte Saint-Luc to pay tribute to a lady who has defended human rights throughout her life. Human rights in our society, above all, is the basis, is the foundation of what we exist for. It's the foundation of a liberal democracy. Today, we pay honor to a courageous champion of all rights, of human rights, more than most other people. She fought to keep liberal values alive in South Africa. Imagine the significance of one woman on her crusade to transform South Africa from apartheid with democracy. Imagine the courage that it took. Imagine the principle that this lady has to do what she did. She once said, and I quote, "I am provocative, and I admit this. It isn't as if I'm only on the receiving end, a poor, frail little creature. I can be thoroughly nasty when I get going, and I don't pull my punches." This lady never pulled her punches. In and out of Parliament, she stood up for detention without trial. She defended human rights and those three important words: rule of law, the respect for the rule of law. She fought against a plan to herd millions of black Africans to scattered homelands, which would have kept them as slaves forever. She demanded the repeal of the Terrorism Act and several other laws that permit arrest without trial, arrest without charge. She also fought to end what's called job reservation system that legally prohibits qualified blacks from working in white jobs. Imagine something which on the surface whites wanted to put across and make it legal to prevent blacks from having equal opportunities to have jobs. Yes, dear friends, one person did make a difference. And if each of us here can remember that lesson in all of our daily endeavors, in all of our daily lives, yes, we can make a difference. We should make a difference. We should stand up whenever we can to express the right of law. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergman. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite the South African Consul General, Nojozi, to come up here and say a few words as well.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It feels good to be here today. His Worship, Mr. Mayor, Anthony Housefather, mayors, all mayors present here with us today, members, Helen Suzman's family present here today, all dignitaries present here, fellow South Africans among us today, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Indeed, I'm delighted to be part of this historic occasion in paying fitting tribute to one of South Africa's women of integrity, Helen Suzman. On May 8, 1996, former President Nelson Mandela signed the new Constitution of South Africa, which we pride ourselves of as a nation. On this historic occasion that marked a milestone of our democracy, the nation decided to hold this prestigious memorial at Sharpeville, one of the desolate townships of the Gauteng province in South Africa. And remember, it was in Sharpeville where more than 60 black people were gunned down by the apartheid regime police for holding a peaceful march against the discriminatory pass laws system. This explains why the democratic South African government chose Sharpeville to celebrate the launching of our constitution. One symbolic gesture of that moment was that former President Nelson Mandela chose Helen Suzman to be his special guest of honor and to accompany him to the signing ceremony. This former President Nelson Mandela did in honor of what Helen Suzman stood for. That is championing human rights and fundamental freedoms that are now enshrined in our new constitution and our country constitution and the Bill of Rights. And she did that at a time it was not fashionable to do so. Obviously, this gesture by Nelson Mandela took some by surprise, as journalists at the time posed questions as to why Dr. Mandela chose to bestow this unique honor on Helen Suzman. The response came simple, and that Helen Suzman, by virtue of being a white person who during the apartheid era could have chosen to selfishly vote and enjoy all benefits enjoyed by white people of South Africa at that time, but because of her moral values, instead, she chose to be unpopular among her parliamentary colleagues and to be a lone voice, not only to champion human rights for all, but to identify with political prisoners like Nelson Mandela, whom she often visited while detained on Robben Island. She engaged in a titanic battle against the forces of apartheid repression that denied fundamental freedoms for all South Africans. Indeed, human rights freedoms we enjoy in South Africa today, we owe its merit to women like Helen Suzman. May the good Lord bless this occasion.
Thank you very much, Consul General, for those very eloquent words. And I think you're absolutely right. It is when people like Helen Suzman stand up for other people's rights, even when they can be quiet. That is what human rights is all about. It's very easy to oppose policies and stay at home and quietly say I don't agree with it, but meanwhile accept all of its benefits. It's a very different thing to go out there in public and fight against what you feel is wrong. And hopefully, by coming to our Human Rights Walkway, our children here in Côte Saint-Luc will on a daily basis as they play in this park understand what people like Helen Suzman and the other honorees have achieved and go out there and fight for human rights in their daily lives. Thank you very much, Councillor Govak. And now I have a great pleasure to actually read to you from the remarks that Helen Suzman emailed me to read to you here today. She very much regrets not being able to be here. She's going to be celebrating her 90th birthday next month, and she felt that the voyage was too long to come all the way to Canada. But she is very excited about being honored here in Côte Saint-Luc. She's been exchanging with us about this ceremony, and we will be sending her a video of what we are going to do tomorrow night at our Volunteers Night in her honor. So Helen's message is as follows. I am greatly honored to have been selected to join the list of distinguished honorees on the City of Côte Saint-Luc's Human Rights Walkway, and I deeply regret being unable to be present today on this auspicious occasion. As someone who has lived in South Africa all of her life, I have been privileged to have had a ringside seat during the remarkable changes that have occurred here, particularly where human rights are concerned, during the 36 years of my parliamentary career. In 1948, the apartheid regime started, and the regime of apartheid was implemented throughout the country. Though there were certainly some features in the Smuts government that preceded it. After almost 40 years of unabashed racial discrimination, the government began to abolish some of its most discriminatory laws. These changes came about not so much because of change of heart, but because it became increasingly impossible to implement them. Today, South Africa has a constitution, adopted in 1996, in which human rights are protected on a wide scale. It contains a Bill of Rights, which specifies that everyone is equal before the law, extends universal franchise to every adult citizen, and enshrines freedom of religion, belief, and opinion. I must admit that like the previous discriminatory laws which could not be implemented, there are many aspects of the Constitution on which the ANC has failed to deliver on its promises of a better life for all. However, as a result of the adoption of its new Constitution, South Africa ceased to be a pariah state, is no longer subjected to economic sanctions, has been readmitted to the Commonwealth, and to its great joy is able to participate in international sport, as all Canadians know from our rugby team being devastated as always by South Africa. Finally, I must say I have had a long and interesting life, sometimes maddening, but never boring. Thank you again to all of the residents of Côte Saint-Luc and its council. It gives me great pleasure to ask Minister Bergman and Consul General Nojozi to come up and help me unveil this plaque. Helen Suzman was born in the mining town of Germiston, South Africa, on November 7, 1917, the daughter of Jewish immigrants from Lithuania. Although never religious, Suzman's Jewish origins imparted two qualities that were important: a sensitivity to the evils of discrimination and a respect for learning and culture. From an early age, she was a voracious reader. Suzman graduated with first-class passes in both her major subjects, economics and economic history, from the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. In 1945, she became a tutor in economic history, a position that was later converted into a lectureship that she held until 1952. She gave up teaching for politics, being elected to Parliament in 1953 as a member of the United Party. She helped form the Liberal Progressive Party in 1959 and was the sole parliamentarian unequivocally opposed to apartheid from 1961 to 1974. Suzman was noted for her strong public criticism of the policies of apartheid at a time when this was unusual among whites, and for have found herself even more of an outsider by virtue of being an English-speaking Jewish woman in a parliament dominated by Calvinist Afrikaner men. She was once accused by a minister of asking questions in parliament that embarrassed South Africa, to which she replied, "It is not my questions that embarrass South Africa, it is your answers." She was a great believer in on-the-spot fact-finding. Whether it was the forced removal of a community, or fracas between police and protesters, or conditions in prisons, she made it her business to go and find out for herself. Her visits to prisons, notably Robben Island, were among her finest achievements. Nelson Mandela wrote in glowing terms of her visit to Robben Island and the improvement in conditions that her interventions brought about. After stepping down as an MP, she served as president of the South African Institute of Race Relations from 1991 to 1993. She served on the Independent Electoral Commission that oversaw the first democratic elections in 1994, and was for 3 years thereafter a member of the Statutory Human Rights Commission. Suzman visited Nelson Mandela numerous times in prison, and was at his side when as president he signed the new South African Constitution in 1996. Following her retirement from politics, Suzman established the Helen Suzman Foundation, geared toward promoting liberal democratic values and promoting human rights in South Africa.